When the word got out about what sort of film it was going to be, one part of it is very violent, people living around here being very violent. Did people react to that? You're depicting us in a way we don't like.
No, I try to be as open as possible, and I suppose if you look at the violence within the film, to be fair, the worst part of the film is actually hidden away in a flat.
And that house was...
That's actually the main...
Yeah,
the lead character.
That's right.
That's Sean's house. The centre of the story is a young boy called Sean. It's kind of the most autobiographical thing that I'd done. So it was about this summer that I had when I was 11, 12 years old, and I became a skinhead myself. My sister was actually going out with a skinhead, like the Woody character, and I became like the little runt of the litter, but he took me under his wing, and it was him who educated me. He said, you can't wear Dr. Martin boots, Levi 501s and a Ben Sherman without realising where they're from and what they're about. It's really about his involvement with two sides of the skinhead fraternity. The side that I really enjoyed being part of, that loved the reggae music, loved the ska, knew where the skinheads were from, and then obviously the introduction of the sort of more racist national front edge. And so you've really got this sort of three-hander really. You've got Sean, the young 12-year-old boy, Woody, who leads his own gang, but he's a much more traditional skinhead, and a guy called Combo, who's played by Stephen Graham, who actually comes out of prison and is one of these people that's almost been politicised in prison, and so he comes out almost to recruit Woody's gang and get them into his own politics. What actually happened to myself, it became quite a tainted experience as I started to sort of, if you like as Sean does in the film, he moves to the other side, and it's that sort of lure of, you know, I'm 11 years old, I've been in a tattoo shop with a fake note from my dad and had a tattoo put on my arm, I've smoked magic mushrooms, I'll try and drink a gallon of scrumpy, and I think I'm a little man.
What happened that repelled you, that pushed you so strongly away from it?
The way that it caught up with me was this evening where I'd always been, you know, I'd been involved in a few scuffles and I'd started a few fights for these skinheads, but it was all like barroom brawl, Wild West stuff. It was one of those things that I'd instigated, I wanted to see, and this guy basically got himself...
You wanted to see a serious fight?
Yeah, I wanted to see man on man, you know, I can take it, is there anyone you're after? Yeah, there's this one bloke, and he built him up like he was some kind of monster, and so we're going up there, and I wanted to see every second of it, and then obviously as it unfolded in front of my eyes, it was like everything I thought it was going to be, it was the complete opposite of. It was literally like seeing someone trying to stamp another human being into a carpet, you know, it was absolutely disgusting, and I was standing there holding this bloke's jacket while he did it. It was the change of this person, of this sort of almost like uncontrollable wave of violence, and they've not been able to stop these feet going down and down and down, and then stopping dead quickly, turning the chip pan off, throwing a pint of water, waking him up and saying, I'll see you in the morning, Kev, you're right. You know, even as I walked off, the shame of it for me was that even as I walked off, I pretended I'd enjoyed it. They were just having a normal life, their tea was on, there was some chips cooking on the cooker, you know, and because of this little shit, their lives had been, you know, basically someone had kicked the door in and tried to kill him.
So when you first encountered skinheads, one of the things about them was that it was not racist. It wasn't the army in waiting for the National Front.
No, not at all. I mean, because, you know, the original idea behind the skinhead culture was that it was like, as opposed to being a mod, to be a mod you needed money, you know, to buy the suit, to buy the clothes, to have the scooter. To be a skinhead you just needed a pair of jeans, a pair of work boots and a white shirt, shave your head, job's a good one. It was like anybody could be one, but not anybody could be one. You had to be working class.
What about the skinheads and reggae music? Because that seems a wonderful contradiction on the surface, doesn't it?
I mean, it seems like a contradiction to people now. The reality was 68, 69, young working class white kids would be working alongside young working class black kids in factories or shipyards. And basically the inevitable happened and they started going to each other's things. And I think that when the young white guys started to hear this music, this Jamaican music, at the blues parties and at the discos, it really had a profound effect on a lot of young working class lads because it was working class, everything about it, and they identified with it.
How did that move over into being a political faction, a small, narrow and anti-black group?
As a kid, I probably didn't understand what happened. The nature of being a skinhead and living in a small town like, you know, where I was from, it really was like someone from the outside obviously looked at it and said, there's a lot of angry kids out there, there's no jobs. At the moment it feels like there's no future for these kids. And like with all things, I think they can only possibly work when there's unhappiness, unsettlement, where they know they can go in. And I suppose the skinheads, you just had to look at them. I mean, they looked violent and they looked aggressive. And in those days it was heavy-handed tactics, whereas now it's changed into other things the National Front has that are far more acceptable, but it's still, the technique is still the same, that you go to an area where people haven't got enough to go around, and that's when you'll succeed.
One of the themes in This Is England is race hatred. And it's very confused, really, because best friends become biggest enemies, black and white.
Yeah.
And yet the idea of racism is strongly there. Does it surprise you that it's still on the front pages of the newspapers?
It doesn't surprise me. I think, obviously, certain things have changed. The Asian community, which seemed to be bearing the brunt of it back in the early 80s, have been accepted. I think the immigration problem that people are seeing now is Eastern European, Polish, and I know people who work on building sites that blame the Polish for everything. But I think the major difference between 1983 and 2007 is that there's still a lot of racist people around, but they won't say it. I think people had this awful fear that they just didn't want Britain to change, and they didn't want to accept another culture.
But it's sort of almost finding an excuse to allow the violence that's inside you to come out, and gives it a kind of completely fake legitimacy, doesn't it? Because I am superior, I can behave as badly as I want.
Yeah, and it's about simplifying people down to types.
Falklands War plays a part in this new film. Can you explain what it meant for the film?
For me, the Falklands kind of represents my own shame of that thing about Englishness. This sort of get the arges, those taglines. It was almost like a World Cup campaign. Like England are going off to Italy, you go get 'em, boys, and all of that, and don't come back without the cup. The fact that we engaged in that and all supported and cheered it, and then I saw this ITM footage of the Argentinians that our paratroopers were fighting against, 16-year-old kids. It was the equivalent of like the SAS taking on a group of school kids with some pitchforks. That's when your shame comes out. Do you feel happy that you've beaten these people? No, I don't at all, actually. I don't like seeing their feet sticking out from tarpaulin. I don't like seeing two British soldiers with a fag hanging out their mouth, dropping their bodies in a pile. We weren't doing anything like on purpose to be cruel, but it's just like Mike Tyson beating up a 4-year-old kid. There's no contest.
And yet again, it's double-edged, because the boy, his father...
He's on the losing side as well.
He's on the losing side as well. The film's out. The latest film's out. What are you on now?
I've had a project that's sort of been banging around and in and out of development. Has never ever got one draft of it written, called King of the Gypsies. If you like, it's like Paddy and mine. It's like our Raging Bull. And it's something that both of us knew this man.
He's a bare-knuckle fighter.
Yeah, but then at the end of his life, he actually went back to God and became a man of peace. And I made a documentary about him as he just hit that patch and started going back to church. I just think there's the most beautiful story there. But I know I can't do it cheap, because if it's set in the 40s and then it's set in the 70s, and, I want to do it properly. If I want to do it properly now, I'd have to have a Brad Pitt. It would have to be a name in there. So I'm waiting for this thing to happen where one of my films goes so big that someone almost sort of says, not quite blank cheque territory, but that becomes feasible.
What do you think of the red carpet?
It's not as long as some we've been on, is it? But it's plusher. I think it's got a better pile.
I might be sat in 40 years going, I'm going to try and make this next. But if This Is England doesn't do the sort of business that I would need for that to do, then I've always got 3 or 4 things banging around, so I'll make something. But, I'm always eternally optimistic that something's going to click, and bums are going to go on seats, and then I can say, let's kick-start it.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
That was terrific.